Hello, welcome to I Know, a Beatles and solo Beatles centric podcast. Today we are discussing the fan syndrome in between John Lennon and Paul McCartney. We will be going through each Beatle album, looking at who's the more prominent Beatle on the album, in my opinion, because personally, I came to Lennon's solo career before I came to any of it, so I have a special place. But even before I came to the Beatles, Imagine was my first ever record. So that holds a special place in my heart, personally. And we also have to consider that we are only looking at the years that Paul and John released music. I am going to go up to 1983 because we did have Pipes of Peace, and I will bend the rules and include Milk and Honey, even though that's posthumous, but we will take it with a grain of salt. So, I'm going to say that overall Paul has had the better solo career. He is the greatest solo artist of all time, and Paul has had the most output than any other solo Beatle. So, let's get started. We're gonna start with the early Beatles. This period I think is pretty easy. We're just gonna be going off of the first 3 albums. The first 4 albums, actually. A Hard Day's Night, Please Please Me with the Beatles, and Beatles for Sale. I'm not a fan of Beatles for Sale really at all. Personally, it's never connected with me personally. I still like it a lot, but off of all 3 of those albums, I would say John is the most predominant Beatle. Just all the material is top notch from John. Paul has some absolute classics, All My Loving, Can't Buy Me Love, I Saw Her Standing There, I'll Follow the Sun, and a bunch of other songs that are absolute classics. But I think John is the more predominant Beatle on those first 4 albums. But that's just my personal opinion. And now we come to one of the harder albums. We go to Help. I'm declaring this a tie. Help is where the Beatles' songwriting matured, in my opinion. You've got the classics, Help, You Got to Hide Your Way, Love Away, It's Only Love, from John, and you got Another Girl, The Night Before, a bunch of, really top-notch Paul songs, and you got the absolute classic ballad, Yesterday. So, I will declare Help a tie. Then I want to go to Rubber Soul, and that would be John is the most predominant Beatle on the album. So first of all, there's a couple of Paul songs that I'm not huge on Rubber Soul. You Won't See Me, I've never been a fan of that song, really. And Michelle, I've actually never been that huge of a fan of. Both good songs. Funny thing, even Drive My Car, I'm not super big on. I prefer actually the live versions that Paul's done on the road, like what they won at Amoeba Record Store, personally. That's just my preference. I think that is just a much better version of it. So I do like Drive My Car now. They used to be my very least favorite Beatles song, but has since grown on me. But I'll give this one to John, You've got classics such as Norwegian Wood and My Life is in the top 10 Beatles songs for me, personally. And just every John song is perfect on that album. It really is. So, now we're going to go to Revolver. This is like the psychedelic era of the Beatles albums. This is an album where I would actually maybe even consider George Harrison to have some of his best material ever. He's got 3 songs, and those 3 songs that are on there that are his are up there pretty high. But we're only doing John and Paul because they're the most popular Beatles. So John, you've got the classics, Tomorrow Never Knows. You've got She Said, I think that's a Lennon song, but yeah. I'm Only Sleeping, Dr. Robert, all really wonderful tracks, but Paul's songs, Here, There, and Everywhere, Good Day, Sunshine, Here, There, and Everywhere might be my favorite Beatles song and the greatest song of all time. I'm not sure. It's in the top 3 or 4, I think, for me personally, but yeah, Revolver's a definite Paul album for me. And then we are going to go to Sgt. Pepper. Now, I'm going to give this one to Paul, but a lot of that is because John doesn't have a ton of material on it. He's got The Benefit of Mr. Kite, Good Morning, Lovely Rita, and I've never been a huge fan of Good Morning, and Lovely Rita, personally. But those are, but A Day in the Life and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and all these Beatles albums are near perfect. The only bump in the road is Beatles for Sale. We're not including Yellow Submarine for this. But, yeah, Sgt. Pepper I will give to Paul. Just Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Fixing a Hole, She's Leaving Home. A Day in the Life. That's really a John song, but it has Paul on it, I think. So I just love that. It's really a mixed song, I would say, but I just really love it. Sgt. Pepper's a great album, I mean. It's known as the greatest album of all time, which some days it could be for me. I'm not really sure. So, Magical Mystery Tour. So, the Paul songs are, Fool on the Hill, Magical Mystery Tour, Your Mother Should Know, Penny Lane, which is one of my favorite Beatles songs ever. But John's 4 songs, Baby You're a Rich Man, Strawberry Fields, I Am the Walrus, and Hello Goodbye are just some of the best songs on the album, and All You Need Is Love, which I'm not the biggest All You Need Is Love fan. It's not one of my favorite Beatles songs, but still, great song. Now, we're gonna go to the White Album. This was the hardest one to do, I will say. And I am declaring it a tie. Every John song is great. Every Paul song is great. I will say, the only song that I do not like is a McCartney song, and that is Honey Pie. That is my least favorite Beatles song ever, personally. And I don't really like it that much at all. But yeah, that's, the White Album. It's a tie. Abbey Road. I want to give this to George Harrison, but I'm going to give it to Paul. John doesn't have a ton of songs on here, and right now there's a lot of heroin Paul's got because. I meant John has because I Want You See She's So Heavy, which is in the top 3 songs on the album. But Come Together, the classic opening song. But I have to give it to Paul. And then Let It Be. John was, kind of not with it at this time. He's really depressed and really hard into heroin at the time, but still good songs. Obviously, Two of Us is my favorite John song on that album, but that's like the last song that they ever really truly collaborated on again. But you've got classics such as Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road. Yeah. I will say if Don't Let Me Down was on there and if the production was altered, maybe it would go to John. But I think with the Phil Spector remix coming, I think that will possibly change my decision on that. So, yeah, that's for the Beatles section. We're going to move on to solo. And John and Paul are equal. I will say that I prefer John very slightly, but and George is right with them too. John's just the most interesting, I think. But McCartney I love and would be my favorite solo artist of all time, and is probably the greatest songwriter of all time. The lyrics, the melody. But I feel bad for John because he gets such a bad rap these days. We all kind of drink the Kool-Aid of saying, oh, Paul was the Beatles. And, right when John died, Paul McCartney was living in John Lennon's shadow, which is really not fair. So that's what happens is you forget about John's songs sometimes. Whenever you look at a magazine, sometimes people look right at Paul. Personally, I go to John because he's my personal favorite. But yeah, that is the Beatles years. Now moving on to the solo years. We do have to bend a couple of rules for this. So please excuse that from me. But yeah. So first of all, we're talking about the first single from John and Paul. So that would be Milk and Honey. Sorry, not Milk and Honey, but Cold Turkey and Another Day. And Cold Turkey is backed with Don't Worry, Kyoko. And Another Day is backed with Oh Woman, Oh Why. So this is difficult because Oh Woman, Oh Why I like better than all 4 of these songs. But we've got to play the rules and go by the A-side. And I love Cold Turkey a lot, so I've got to give it to John for there. So in 1970, we have the albums McCartney and Plastic Ono Band. These are both good albums, and I both love these albums a lot. But I think that there's no doubt about it that Plastic Ono Band is the better out of these two. They're both very highly received and considered some of their best works nowadays, but back then McCartney was slammed. Plastic Ono Band was kind of a surprise for a lot of people with the God song and saying that he doesn't believe in Beatles, obviously. But yeah, that is what we're gonna go with for 1970. We get Plastic Ono Band. 1971. This was the hardest out of even the Beatles, I think. Because Ram is in my top 3 Paul albums, and sometimes my favorite on some days. And Imagine is one of John's best albums. So they're both considered like the best works from both of the men. And the only song that I'm gonna go for what I enjoy. I love every song on Ram. Long-Haired Lady and the Ram on Reprise lesser, but I've never been a fan of I Don't Want to Be a Soldier. And Give Me Some Truth's kind of difficult to listen to. How Do You Sleep? It's, aimed at Paul, but too many people, which is actually my favorite song on Ram. But, that's a more obvious bash, in Ram. But, yeah, that is, I give it to Ram by a slight. 1972, we have Sometime in New York City and with Wildlife. These are both considered the worst albums by these artists, by each critics. I enjoy some songs on Sometime in New York City, and I enjoy a few songs off of Wildlife. You just have to be in the mood for that album to get it. But I'll give that a tie, I think. So 1973. We have to bend the rules a little bit. We're giving 1974 Band on the Run just because that was bigger in 1974. So we're giving this Red Rose Speedway versus Mind Games. So those two albums actually tend to get overlooked because if you think about it, George and Ringo both had huge success with those two albums. And Mind Games and Red Rose Speedway are both, kind of considered middle-of-the-road albums, I think. I personally absolutely love both of those albums. But I think I'll give that to Mind Games. Not by far, but I do like it a lot. 1974. So, this is going to be a little controversial. This is Band on the Run versus Walls and Bridges. We all know technically Band on the Run is the better album, but this is really hard to do but Walls and Bridges is my favorite Lennon album, and I love it, and it's in my top 5 albums of all time, personally. So I have to give it to Walls and Bridges, personally. We're gonna go to 1975. Rock and Roll for John, which is not that great, I don't think. It's probably the worst album he's ever done, at least. And then Venus and Mars. There's no competition here, folks. We've got to give it to Venus and Mars. It's another top Paul album for me personally. So yeah, that is the solo years for the first 5. Then we take 5 years away, and we go to 1980. Now, Double Fantasy is hard to listen to. Double Fantasy is difficult to listen to because of the circumstances surrounding John's death at the time. 3 weeks later, he was shot and killed very tragically. But I'll give it a tie because I know Double Fantasy is the better album, but I can't listen to Double Fantasy much. Not bashing the songs, not bashing Yoko. I actually like the Yoko songs a lot on that album. And I like the Lennon material as well, except for Cleanup Time. I've never really liked that song much. But McCartney, too, that usually is down on people's lists for his album rankings low, which I like that album a lot. I have a lot of fun with it, and I just love it to pieces. So I'll give that a tie. So they're even, they're equal. Paul, I think John was slightly better than the Beatles, but as a solo artist, Paul's had a better solo career, but that does not mean that I don't love John Lennon's solo career. John is the second greatest solo artist of all time, I think. The one thing about him that's good having such a short career is that I can find maybe 10 songs that I don't like. Where Paul, I could probably find 20 songs that I just don't like at all. And that goes with George and Ringo. I'm not familiar with all of Ringo's albums, just 5 or 6 of them, but yeah. So that is the John versus Paul fan syndrome, comparing the solo careers and the Beatles years on who had the more prominent album and the more prominent tracks. This was difficult to do, but yeah, they're equal, and John or Paul were never the Beatles. The Beatles were 4 people. Thank you for listening. Please let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. If you're welcome to make a response video to this, if you want to. It's an interesting discussion. And remember that Linda McCartney was not well liked by the critics. So, and I love Linda McCartney, and I like Yoko a lot. But we cannot bash Linda. Not bash Linda and bash Yoko, because they were just the wives that wanted to be involved. Thank you for listening. Again, please subscribe and share and comment your thoughts down below on what you'd like to see in future episodes of I Know. I am your host, Hudson, and I am signing off.